Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I'll be providing my top 6 favorite male fantasy protagonists. I have been doing a lot of ranking videos, a lot of my favorites videos, a lot of least favorite videos like that, and I decided I wanted to rank my favorite male protagonists in fantasy. I've done like a favorite villains, but this is now favorite male protagonists. I'll do a favorite female protagonists list eventually, but this is my favorite male protagonists list. And I was looking through my top favorites, and I was like, which ones stand out to me? And I could have just limited it to a top 5, but I thought a top 6 works better because the difference between my number 6 and my number 7 is really big. But my number 6 is really close to my number 5 and how I view them, so I decided to just do a top 6. So that's what we're getting today. Top 6 favorite fantasy male protagonists. I have my books stacked here, and I'm going to talk about which book each male protagonist has shined the most in, and when I liked them the most. And some of these are standalone, so that's the only book they were in, and some of these are part of series, but I'm picking out the one that I liked the most. So I'm going to start out with my number 6 is Sir Duncan the Tall from A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. This is a novella collection set in the Game of Thrones, the Song of Ice and Fire universe. And this book features 3 novellas that take place about 100 years earlier. And they are following this knight who has this squire. And this squire has a secret about his family that is pretty obvious when you start reading about it. But this squire, who is a very noble squire, or not squire, this knight, who's a very noble knight, decides to go on this, he goes on these adventures, and he brings the squire with him. And the knight is just the most honorable guy you could think of. He's very respectful of others. He's very much fighting for honor. He's very much trying to do the right thing. And Sir Duncan the Tall is just an absolute favorite character of mine. The way he's put in awkward situations in this book and then has to work hard to get out of those awkward situations is just delightful. He has this sense of morality that most Game of Thrones characters do not have. And so it's really refreshing to read that about him. And of course he stumbles every once in a while, he makes mistakes, but in this three novellas, he proves what it's like to be a knight and how to be a good knight. And I wish we had more novellas. Like, I actually am more interested in getting more of these novellas than I am in the end of Game of Thrones, because I really like these novellas, and I really like the way that Martin writes in this style. This is more my kind of fantasy style than his Game of Thrones books. But still, I loved this book, and I loved the character of Sir Duncan the Tall. Let's hop on my number 5. My number 5 is going to be a character that most of you have probably heard of, and that is Rand al'Thor. So I will try to avoid major spoilers for The Wheel of Time. I will talk about things that are generally known about it. One thing, and my favorite book that he shows up in is The Gathering Storm. He's in a lot of the Wheel of Time novels, all but one, I believe. But this is my favorite version of him, particularly the ending of this book. The ending of this book is one of my favorite endings ever. What I really like about Rand is he goes through the ringer, and yet he tries his hardest to do the right thing. Throughout these books, Rand is faced with difficult situations because of who he is, what his family is, what his political situation is, and what his role and duty in society is. And Rand has to keep a lot of people that he wants to be close to at arm's length, and really has to connect with people that he really doesn't want to. And there are some women in his life that he loves that he has just no idea what to do with, and he's caught in the middle of this. It's not really a love triangle because there's multiple women, but he is really trying to be honorable, but at the same time not disrespect their wishes, and it's a very difficult needle to thread. And I don't really particularly love that part of his story, but it's when he's trying to do his best for society that he really shines. And he has anger issues, and he has issues with other characters getting along sometimes, and some arrogance issues sometimes. But man, in this book in particular, but in the whole series, you see him just try his hardest and demonstrate that sometimes you may not always know what the right thing is, but you're trying to get there. And I love that about his character, and I just love him in these books. And I go back and forth between whether he's my character and another favorite character is my favorite, but I'll talk about that in a second. Now we're getting to my number 4 favorite male protagonist character, and that is Raoden from Elantris. I talk about Elantris a lot. It's my favorite fantasy novel. Strike that. It's my favorite novel of all time. It's my favorite book. I love it. I loved everything about this book. One of the villains in this book made my top villain list. Raoden makes my top hero list because I love Raoden. Now, this is an interesting character because, with Rand al'Thor, you have like 14 books to connect with him. He's not the main character in all the books, but he is like a major character in 14 books, whereas Raoden is just one character in one book here. But he has a lot to do here. Raoden is this character who, at the beginning of the book, so this is not a spoiler whatsoever, is cast with the Sheod, which is like this disease. It's like leprosy or zombieism. And he has to go to this place where all the lepers, all the people who get the Sheod, go to, Elantris. And he basically goes from having nothing. He has one thing of bread in his possession. And he goes from having nothing to building his own organization, his own political organization in the place of the lepers. And you would think that's bizarre. You'd think no one could ever make a good situation out of this, but Raoden does. Raoden absolutely does. He is brilliant in this book. The way he's able to deal with the different types of gang leaders is great. The way he's able to make friends. The way he starts, he has one person who he makes a deal with. Gives this person bread, and he says, for 30 days, you will work for me and teach me everything you know. And then he convinces that friend to stay with him longer, and he gets another friend, and then another, and then another. And so he starts building his relationships and giving people purpose. And he researches, he loves reading, and he loves learning, and he's all about doing the right thing. Meanwhile, he's got a bit of an issue because there is this princess who is bringing in food into his town, and he doesn't actually want the food because the food will people lose their purpose. It's really complicated, but the way he is just caught between a rock and a hard place so often in these books is just delightful. And the way he's able to hold on to his morals, to hold on to his purpose in life, no matter what life throws at him, is just fantastic. So I love the character of Raoden. Now we're getting into my number 3 favorite fantasy character. And my number 3 fantasy character is another Wheel of Time character, and that is Perrin Aybara from the Wheel of Time. I'm going to talk about his character in Knife of Dreams. So part of the problem with Rand, I felt, was that even though he was like a good character in a lot of what he does for trying to save the world, I didn't like the way he dealt with his relationships with his loved ones, specifically with the women who loved him. Reverse that, Perrin, not necessarily the best connection for how he deals with the world, but with how he deals with his loved ones, I think is really strong. And in this book, and really throughout the whole books, a lot of Perrin's purpose is with his wife character. I won't spoil who that ends up becoming. And at one point in the books, his wife is captured, and he spends multiple books trying to get her back. And in this book, this is the book where he's really trying to get her back, and you see the lengths that he's willing to go to rescue his wife. You see the determination in his eyes. You see the hardworking nature of him, and you see this determination that's just not always seen in male protagonists. A lot of male protagonists have this, I'm going to save the damsel in distress, but they're not usually going through the ringer like Perrin does. They usually don't have multi-book arcs. Usually they have like one book, and by the end of the book they've reached the accomplishment. Perrin has to go through this multiple books and multiple times with multiple loved ones, not just his wife, but other characters that are dear to him. And he also has pretty good leadership abilities, and he goes through in one of the later books, the trials that he goes through, literal and metaphorical trials, are just gut-wrenching. And so I love the character of Perrin. Getting into my number 2, this is one of the first fantasy characters I've ever read about. Actually, I take it back. This is the first fantasy character I really read about outside of, Lord of the Rings and the Narnia books, is the character of Allanon from the Shannara series, particularly in Sword of Shannara. Allanon is the wise old magic user who helps guide our characters on their journey. He's the Gandalf of this series. And in this book in particular, he is Gandalf. But Allanon has this incredible journey because he is one of these characters that he sacrifices so much to be the wise character. He doesn't have a family. He doesn't have loved ones. Most people hate him or fear him or think that he's a threat or whatever. And nobody really knows him and likes him. And so Allanon just has to convince people, hey, there's a problem, we need to go fix it. And oftentimes these people don't believe him, and yet he keeps trying, and he spends all his time as a historian, and yet he withholds information because he knows that if he gives them all the information, there will be a problem. He knows that if he gives them everything, they will not like him. He believes that if he gives them all the information, that they will all of a sudden do the wrong thing with that information. And so Allanon truly is just this wonderful old wise character, probably of the wise mentor characters. I'm talking Gandalf, I'm talking Dumbledore, I'm talking about Moraine Sedai, I'm talking about Allanon, I'm talking about all those types of characters. I think Allanon is my favorite because boy does he just go through the ringer in all of these books, and nobody believes him. And he has this staying power that is really, his influence is felt in all the later Shannara books. So he really has cemented himself as a favorite, and he's not even in that many books himself. His presence is felt in a lot of them, but he's a great character. Oh, but we're getting into one of my favorites. Actually, my favorite male fantasy character, and I am shocked to say what book this character comes from, what series, and which character this is. This is really funny, I think, because when I read this book, I don't think I would have said this is my favorite fantasy character, but as I've thought about it, he really has become. And it's partially because of the TV show, but it's also because of the books. And that would be Ned Stark from Game of Thrones. I know, I normally don't like a lot of the characters in Game of Thrones. I was so frustrated at how evil everyone is, and how everyone has bad motives, and how everyone in Game of Thrones is just wicked and evil. And Song of Ice and Fire books and the Game of Thrones shows, everyone is just wicked and evil, and there's no morally good characters. Even Jon Snow and Ned Stark's oldest son, and I'm forgetting his name, they even fall and they make huge mistakes in this series. But Ned Stark is the one truly honorable character in the series. And he ends up, for one thing, he ends up losing a lot of friends because he refuses to lie, because he refuses to cheat, because he refuses to do dishonorable things. He would rather do the honorable thing. He even has to go against his own intentions to do the honorable things in this book. And so he is just a brilliant character. I thought Sean Bean played him perfectly. I wish we got more. I wish we got like a prequel story. I wish we got a TV show about Robert's Rebellion and maybe got to see like a younger Sean Bean being part of this, because Sean Bean just killed the role. And this character, not only does he go through all of this stuff, but he has the secret of Jon Snow's parentage. And it's pretty obvious from the first book, Jon Snow's parentage is not Ned Stark. You know that Ned Stark didn't actually father this child with another woman. You know that there's something else going on, and there's a reason Ned Stark is protecting this child that is so close to him and treating him the way he is. And he even loses his reputation from his family, from his wife, from his kids. He loses reputation in his town, and yet it's still the honorable thing because he needs to protect Jon Snow. And it is just brilliant the way that you see his perspective, and you see the pain in his eyes, and you see how difficult it is for him to have to live through all this, while at the same time he's trying to solve a mystery in King's Landing of why did Jon Arryn die, and who's behind it, and what will they do next. And he's trying to solve those mysteries while also playing the Game of Thrones, and failing miserably. So I really like the character of Ned Stark. He's just, despite only being in this one book, man, he's stuck with me as a male fantasy protagonist character. And I'm like, that is a great guy. So that is my list of my 6 favorite male fantasy protagonist characters. If you have read into the fantasy genre, who is your favorite male protagonist? And if you have a ranking, let me know the ranking. And if you've read any of these books and know any of these characters, which ones did you agree with me as putting them in my list, and which ones you should never have included them? They're awful characters. I'd love to learn all of that and more down in the comments section below. So until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.